For years, electric cars carried the same problem. It did not matter how futuristic they looked or how fast they accelerated. Most people still had one fear in the back of their minds. What if the battery runs out? And what if charging takes too long? That fear became the biggest barrier, preventing many consumers from fully switching to EVs. Gasoline cars still had one major advantage. You could stop at a gas station, refill in 5 minutes, and continue driving immediately. Meanwhile, EV owners often had to wait 20 minutes, 40 minutes, sometimes even longer, just to recover part of their battery range. And psychologically, that difference mattered a lot more than companies wanted to admit. Then, China introduced a number that shocked the global auto industry: 7 minutes. That is the number associated with CATL's newest battery technology. Under ideal conditions, the company claims its latest systems can deliver nearly 1,000 kilometers of range, with ultra-fast charging speeds that were almost unimaginable just a few years ago. Suddenly, the biggest weakness of electric vehicles no longer looked permanent. And the company behind it was not Tesla, not Mercedes-Benz, and not an American tech giant. It was CATL. While most consumers outside China barely knew the company's name, CATL has quietly become the world's most powerful EV battery manufacturer. With battery platforms like Shengsing and Kilin, the company is now pushing charging technology into an entirely different category. The biggest breakthrough is something called 8C charging. In simple terms, it allows the battery to absorb enormous amounts of power in an extremely short time, without creating the same level of heat and damage that normally comes with ultra-fast charging. For years, engineers struggled with this exact problem. Faster charging usually meant higher risks, more battery stress, and shorter lifespan. CATL claims it has dramatically reduced those limitations. And that changes the entire EV experience. Imagine stopping at a charging station, walking inside to buy a coffee, checking your phone for a few minutes, and returning to a vehicle that is already ready for hundreds of more miles on the road. For the first time, charging an EV starts feeling less like a compromise and more like normal daily convenience. Then there is another number that caught the attention of engineers around the world: 255 watt-hours per kilogram. That figure represents energy density, meaning the battery can store more power without becoming excessively large or heavy. This matters because one of the biggest challenges in EV development has always been balancing range, weight, and efficiency. But the most important part of this story is not just the technology itself. It is what the technology represents. For years, Tesla was viewed as the company leading the electric future, while Europe promoted itself as the home of automotive engineering excellence. But when it came to solving the single biggest psychological problem behind EV adoption, range anxiety, the breakthrough shaking the industry came from China. And that changes the conversation completely. Because the EV war is no longer just about who can build electric cars. Almost every major automaker can do that now. The real battle is about who can make EVs feel effortless, convenient, and impossible to ignore. And right now, China appears to be moving faster than everyone else. As China's EV technology began accelerating faster and faster, the United States started realizing something uncomfortable. This was no longer just another wave of cheap consumer products entering global markets. This was an industrial shift powerful enough to threaten one of America's most important sectors, the auto industry itself. For more than a century, the automotive world was heavily shaped by Western companies. Detroit became a symbol of industrial power. American brands dominated highways, factories, and global influence. Even when foreign competition arrived from Japan and Europe, the United States still remained one of the central pillars of the global car industry. But China's rise in electric vehicles created a completely different kind of threat. Because this time, China was not competing with lower labor costs alone. It was competing with faster innovation, massive battery production, advanced supply chains, and increasingly aggressive pricing. Chinese EV companies were starting to produce vehicles that were not only cheaper, but in some cases more technologically advanced than Western alternatives. And Washington noticed. In 2024, the United States announced a massive increase in tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, raising them to 100%. Officially, the policy was presented as a way to protect American manufacturing and prevent unfair competition from flooding the domestic market. Politicians argued that Chinese companies benefited from enormous state support and could destabilize the American auto sector if left unchecked. But to many observers, the move also revealed something deeper, a sense of panic. Because historically, countries usually raise tariff walls when they believe their domestic industries cannot survive open competition. And that is what made this moment so symbolic. For years, America positioned itself as the global leader of innovation, technology, and free market competitiveness. But now, instead of defeating Chinese EVs through better products, faster batteries, or cheaper production, Washington was using political barriers to slow China down. That alone changed the tone of the global conversation. The uncomfortable reality for many Western automakers is that China's EV ecosystem developed incredibly fast. Companies like BYD, NIO, XPeng, and CATL were scaling production at levels that many American manufacturers struggled to match. At the same time, Chinese battery technology kept improving, charging speeds became faster, and manufacturing costs continued falling. Meanwhile, many American companies were still trying to solve profitability problems inside their EV divisions. And this is why the tariff debate became bigger than cars. It became a debate about whether the United States was starting to lose its technological advantage in one of the most important industries of the future. Because once governments begin relying heavily on protectionism, critics often see it as a warning sign that the real battle, the innovation race itself, may already be slipping away. Of course, American companies are still powerful. Tesla remains one of the most influential EV brands on Earth. The United States still leads in many areas of software, AI, and advanced technology. But in the specific world of battery manufacturing and affordable EV production, China is now operating at a speed that has made even Washington nervous. And the tariff wall may be the clearest proof of that fear so far. For decades, Europe treated its auto industry like a symbol of national pride. Germany had Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Volkswagen. Italy had Ferrari and Lamborghini. France had Peugeot and Renault. The continent built its reputation on precision engineering, powerful combustion engines, and mechanical excellence. For a long time, Europe believed it represented the highest level of automotive craftsmanship in the world. And honestly, for decades, that belief was difficult to challenge. German engineering especially became almost mythical inside the global car industry. Owning a German car was not just about transportation. It became a status symbol associated with quality, prestige, and technological superiority. Europe mastered the age of internal combustion engines so completely that many people assumed its dominance would continue forever. But the EV revolution changed the rules of the game. Because electric vehicles do not depend on traditional engine mastery in the same way gasoline cars do. The heart of the new industry is no longer the combustion engine. It is the battery, the software, the charging ecosystem, and the supply chain behind them. And suddenly, Europe no longer looked untouchable. While Chinese companies spent years aggressively investing in battery technology and EV manufacturing, many European automakers moved more cautiously. Some executives believed gasoline and hybrid vehicles would remain dominant longer than expected. Others underestimated how quickly China's EV ecosystem was evolving. Now the gap is becoming impossible to ignore. One of the clearest examples came when Volkswagen announced a major partnership with Chinese EV company XPeng. The deal was not just about selling cars in China. Volkswagen was openly relying on Chinese technology and software development to strengthen its EV future. Around the same time, Stellantis, the parent company behind brands like Jeep, Peugeot, Fiat, and Chrysler, invested heavily in Chinese EV startup Leapmotor. Just a few years ago, these kinds of partnerships would have sounded unthinkable. For decades, European automakers exported technology to the rest of the world. Now some of them are turning toward China for help adapting to the electric era, and that shift is psychologically massive. Because this is not simply business cooperation, it represents a deeper power transition inside the global automotive industry. Europe spent over a century dominating the world through internal combustion engineering. German engines became legendary. European performance cars shaped automotive culture globally. But in the battery age, the center of gravity is moving eastward, toward companies like CATL that now control some of the most important technology behind modern EVs. And that creates an uncomfortable reality for Europe. The industry that once taught the world how to build cars is now learning from the country it once viewed mainly as a low-cost manufacturing hub. In many ways, Europe has become a student inside a battery revolution increasingly led by China. And for legacy automakers built around gasoline-era prestige, adapting to that new reality may become the hardest challenge they have faced in generations. Most people outside the auto industry still think of electric vehicles in terms of car brands: Tesla, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Ford, BYD. But behind nearly every major EV company, there is another layer of power most consumers never see: the battery supply chain. And sitting at the center of that system is one company that has quietly become one of the most influential industrial forces on Earth: CATL. At first glance, CATL does not look like a company that should dominate global headlines. It does not have the celebrity image of Tesla. Its CEO is not constantly posting online like Elon Musk. The company rarely becomes part of mainstream Western conversations. But inside the EV industry, CATL's influence is massive, because modern electric vehicles are only as powerful as the batteries inside them. And right now, CATL controls an enormous part of that world. The company holds close to 40% of the global EV battery market, making it the single largest battery manufacturer on the planet. That number alone is staggering. It means millions of electric vehicles across multiple continents are directly dependent on technology designed and produced by a Chinese company most consumers barely recognize. And CATL's power goes far beyond simply building batteries. Over the last decade, China aggressively expanded its control over the entire EV supply chain, from lithium processing and rare mineral refinement to battery manufacturing and industrial scaling. While many Western countries focused mainly on designing cars, China focused on controlling the infrastructure behind the future itself. CATL became one of the clearest symbols of that strategy. Today, major automakers across the world rely heavily on Chinese battery production to keep their EV ambitions alive. Without stable battery access, even the biggest car companies on Earth would struggle to scale electric vehicle production at competitive prices. And that creates a dangerous dependency. Because once one company controls such a large portion of the global supply chain, it gains enormous leverage over the entire industry. In many ways, CATL has become something far bigger than a supplier. It now operates like a technological gatekeeper, standing between automakers and the future EV economy. One of the clearest examples of this shift happened in the United States itself. Ford announced plans to build a battery plant in Michigan, using technology licensed from CATL. That detail shocked many people because it revealed something uncomfortable about America's position in the battery race. Even one of the most iconic American automakers was now relying on Chinese battery expertise to compete in the next era of transportation. Politically, the project immediately became controversial. Critics in Washington argued that America should not become dependent on Chinese technology for such a strategic industry. Supporters defended the deal as necessary for keeping American manufacturing competitive. But regardless of politics, the message was clear. The United States still has powerful car companies. Europe still has famous engineering brands. But when it comes to the most critical technology inside modern EVs, many Western automakers are increasingly forced to work with China, whether they want to or not. And that is why CATL's rise feels so important. Because this is not just about batteries anymore. It is about industrial influence, technological dependency, and global leverage. The company has positioned itself so deeply inside the EV ecosystem that removing it from the equation would create enormous disruption across the automotive world. In the gasoline era, Western countries controlled much of the automotive hierarchy. But in the battery era, China built something different. Instead of simply competing brand against brand, it built dominance at the foundation level. The raw materials, the processing, the manufacturing capacity, and the battery technology itself. And now, much of the global auto industry is standing on top of that foundation, whether it admits it or not. For most of automotive history, the balance of power was easy to understand. America dominated mass production. Europe dominated engineering prestige. Japan dominated efficiency and reliability. And China was often viewed mainly as the world's factory floor. A country associated with manufacturing scale rather than technological leadership. But the EV revolution is changing that hierarchy faster than many expected. Because what China built over the last decade was not just a car industry. It built an entire industrial ecosystem around the future of energy itself. From lithium mining and mineral processing to battery manufacturing, charging infrastructure, and large-scale EV production, China positioned itself at nearly every critical layer of the supply chain. And now the results are becoming visible. Chinese battery companies are leading charging technology. Chinese EV brands are expanding globally. Western automakers are forming partnerships with Chinese firms just to stay competitive. Even governments are beginning to respond with tariffs and protectionist policies out of fear that domestic industries could fall behind. That is why this conversation has become much bigger than cars. What we are watching may actually be the early stages of a larger economic power shift, one where the technologies defining the next industrial era are increasingly being controlled by China rather than the West. And the difficult reality for America and Europe is that catching up may not be easy anymore. Because building a competitive EV industry is not just about designing attractive vehicles. It requires battery supply chains, raw material access, charging infrastructure, industrial scaling, and years of manufacturing experience. China spent more than a decade aggressively investing in all of those areas at the same time, while much of the world moved slower. Now that lead is starting to compound. Of course, Western companies are still powerful. Tesla remains massively influential. Germany still produces some of the most respected vehicles in the world. America still dominates many areas of advanced technology. But in the specific race that may define the future of transportation, China is no longer following behind. It is setting the pace. And that is why the phrase, "China killed the US and European auto industry," no longer sounds like simple internet exaggeration. Whether people like the wording or not, there is now a growing sense that the center of gravity inside the automotive world is shifting eastward. And now the global market may soon face a difficult question. When consumers walk into dealerships in the future, will they still choose more expensive and slower technology simply because of loyalty to traditional Western brands? Or will they choose the future being built by China instead?